a hush fell upon the night sky when the first whispers of Atlas arrived. It was March, and the world's great telescopes gazed outward, sweeping the heavens in routine vigil, when a dim, fleeting shimmer appeared at the edge of human perception. Against the canvas of the stars, those fixed, ancestral lights, there emerged a streak, faint yet insistent, a signal from the deep. The records would later mark it formally, 3I Atlas, the third interstellar object ever confirmed to cross into our solar system. But in that first moment, it was less a designation and more a mystery, a riddle slipping quietly into the gravitational embrace of the Sunday. Astronomers recognized immediately the oddity before them. It was not the ordinary wanderer from our own Oort cloud, not the remnant of a solar birth. This object had traveled unimaginable distances, moving with a velocity so great it could never be bound to the Sunday. Its trajectory whispered of other stars, other origins, places where the same fundamental forces bent light and matter, but under skies we may never see. Here, though, it was only a trespasser, an interloper passing briefly across the human stage. And yet, Atlas was different from those who had come before. Oumuamua, the first, had shocked the scientific world in 2017 with its elongated shadow and puzzling acceleration. Borisov, the second, had been more like a comet, a reminder that interstellar objects could carry familiar signatures. But Atlas? Atlas shimmered with contradiction. It was faint when first observed, then brighter than predictions allowed. Its coma, a veil of dust and gas surrounding such objects, behaved strangely, swelling and collapsing with rhythms that seemed untethered to sunlight alone. The name chosen was apt. Atlas, the titan who bore the heavens upon his shoulders. This interstellar body seemed to carry the weight of unanswered questions, balancing between what science could explain and what it could not. Night after night, telescopes turned toward it. In Hawaii, in Chile, in the Canary Islands, the watchers of the sky fixed their instruments on its path. Each image, each data point, deepened the sense that something uncanny had entered our realm. Was it a cometary fragment torn from some alien system? A shard of rock flung across light years by stellar tides? Or was it something stranger still, an artifact not born of geology but of intention? The thought lingered, unspoken in the early reports, but palpable in the air. In laboratories and observatories, scientists bent over the faint readings of light curves and spectra. They traced its motion against the background stars, calculating its hyperbolic trajectory. It was moving fast, so fast that no solar body could have birthed it. It came from elsewhere, a traveler from the abyss between suns. For some, this alone was miracle enough, that across the cosmic gulf, a fragment had arrived to touch our world with its presence. But for others, the miracle was not enough. Its brightness fluctuated in ways no model predicted. Its body resisted classification. It seemed to dance with forces invisible, a marionette without visible strings. The public, when they heard, felt the echo of awe and fear that always attends a visitor from beyond. Newspapers spoke of alien comets, of messengers from other systems. Talk show hosts asked whether this could be the one, a probe, a craft, a message cast into the sea of stars by distant minds. Scientists bristled at such speculation, yet they too could not shake the memory of Oumuamua, when even cautious voices admitted the alien hypothesis, however improbable, could not be dismissed outright. Atlas glowed faintly in photographs, a pale smear, a thin brushstroke on the black canvas of space. But to those who stared, it seemed alive. Alive not in the biological sense, but in the way mystery itself seems to breathe, to pulse, to invite curiosity. It called upon humanity's ancient instinct to look upward and wonder what dwells beyond. Soon, debates would ignite, instruments would strain, and theories both cautious and wild would rise. But in that first revelation, before arguments hardened, Atlas was simply a presence silent, enigmatic, and full of promise. A reminder that the universe is not closed, not known, not settled. It is open, vast, and still capable of surprise. The first glimpses of Atlas came not with fanfare, but with the quiet hum of observatories doing what they always do, sweeping the dark for traces of movement. At the Mount Lemmon survey in Arizona, at Pan-STARRS in Hawaii, at lesser-known stations in Chile and Spain, software flagged faint streaks against the endless backdrop of stars. To most, such streaks were routine: near-Earth asteroids, icy comets from our own Oort cloud, fragments of long-forgotten collisions. Yet when astronomers plotted these points into orbits, something disquieting emerged. The numbers refused to conform. Atlas was not bound to the Sunday. It did not swing in a neat ellipse, tethered like a stone on a string. Instead, its orbit was open, hyperbolic, mathematically destined never to return. That single fact changed everything. For centuries, astronomers had known that the solar system was not sealed. The dark beyond could cast in fragments like stones through glass. Yet only recently had humanity begun to catch them in the act, to watch as interstellar debris cut briefly across our patch of sky. As images accumulated, the story of Atlas sharpened. Its brightness rose and fell with curious rhythms. A small coma appeared, faint yet undeniable, suggesting sublimation of ices as sunlight touched its surface. At first glance, it seemed comet-like, but the more closely researchers looked, the less it resembled any comet they had catalogued. Its light curves implied a shape oddly elongated, perhaps flattened, its rotation irregular, wobbling like a coin before it settles. In Hawaii, Pan-STARRS astronomers exchanged messages deep into the night. One observer noted the oddity of its acceleration. Another compared its trajectory with Oumuamua, drawing uneasy parallels. In Chile, the Atacama Large Millimeter Array strained for data, though the signal was faint, elusive, slipping between sensitivity thresholds. At radio observatories, SETI groups quietly tuned their receivers, hopeful yet cautious. They had done the same for Oumuamua. Silence had been the reply. Would Atlas speak differently? For the wider world, first glimpses came through published images. Faint smudges turned into color, enhanced composites. To the untrained eye, they were underwhelming mere points of light. Yet to astronomers, they were windows into an interstellar riddle. Each pixel carried information about size, about spin, about composition. Each pixel hinted at origins buried across light years. Conversations emerged between cautious scientists and restless dreamers. Was Atlas another natural fragment, an echo of planetary formation in some other system? Or was it, as a few dared whisper, something not natural at all? The idea of artificiality had been seeded by Oumuamua when Harvard astronomer Avi Loeb publicly proposed that it might have been a light sail, a wafer-thin probe pushed by starlight. His suggestion had been controversial, but it left a mark. With Atlas, the question resurfaced like a ghost. Still, early official statements leaned on conservatism. The Minor Planet Center logged its discovery, assigning its interstellar designation 3.1, third of its kind. In technical bulletins, the language remained dry, clinical, precise, but between the lines lingered a deeper truth. Humanity was witnessing a visitor from another star. The distance it had traveled was unimaginable, perhaps millions of years, perhaps ejected by the death throes of a sun unlike our own. Perhaps the silent remainder of a shattered planet. Whatever its origin, it was here, briefly visible, briefly touchable by human thought. Across the globe, amateur astronomers pointed their backyard telescopes toward its predicted path. Some captured faint trails, confirming what professionals already knew. Atlas was both real and elusive, a guest on borrowed time. To glimpse it was to connect with the vastness, to see in one's eyepiece the evidence that the solar system is but a crossroads in a universe teeming with wanderers. And so the first glimpses became more than data, they became myth in the making. Astronomers compared notes, refined measurements, recalculated orbits. Each act, each observation, was a step deeper into mystery. The object had been seen, the object had been named. But what it truly was, rock, ice, or artifact, remained obscured, as though hidden deliberately. The first glimpses did not solve the riddle, they only sharpened it. The whisper of alien possibility crept in almost immediately. For those scientists are trained to speak with caution, to prefer the ordinary explanation until extraordinary evidence demands otherwise, Atlas was unsettling. Its faint light seemed to mock the very act of classification. Each new image revealed not simplicity but contradiction, a behavior that strayed from the predictable choreography of comets and asteroids, and in those contradictions, the human imagination stirred. Reporters were quick to seize the angle. Headlines appeared, "A mysterious visitor from the stars. Could Atlas be alien?" The word alien carried both dread and allure, resonating far beyond scientific circles. It was not a technical label, but a metaphor for otherness, for the intrusion of the unfamiliar into human life. In offices and cafes, on talk shows and podcasts, people speculated, what if this object was not a natural wanderer, but a creation? What if it was built, not born? The scientists themselves were more restrained, yet even among them the thought lingered. The precedent of Oumuamua still haunted astronomy. That object, elongated and accelerating without apparent jets of gas, had inspired Avi Loeb to propose it might have been a sailcraft. His suggestion had been met with resistance, even scorn, but it was not forgotten. With Atlas, the echoes of that debate returned. Some noted that its fluctuating brightness seemed oddly regular, almost patterned. Others pointed out that its faint outbursts resembled controlled pulses rather than chaotic eruptions of sublimating ice. The alien whisper was not just born of scientific anomaly, it was cultural, psychological, inevitable. Humanity has always peered at the skies with the suspicion that someone else might be out there, watching, sending, testing. Ancient myths spoke of messengers from the heavens, of fiery wheels and wandering stars. Modern science clothed those same longings in the language of probes, transmissions, and interstellar contact. Atlas, whether it wished to or not, became the canvas for these projections. And yet, the whisper was also tempered by fear. Stephen Hawking had warned, long before, that first contact could be perilous. Just as the meeting of civilizations on Earth often ended in conquest, so too could cosmic encounters. To imagine Atlas as alien was not merely to hope, it was to dread. What if this was reconnaissance? What if it was debris from a civilization destroyed, a silent warning drifting between stars? The possibilities were endless, and with each possibility came unease. Astronomers tried to anchor the conversation in data. They plotted light curves, measured velocity, analyzed spectral fingerprints. They spoke of icy nuclei, dust fragmentation, cometary evolution. But outside the scientific journals, those technical explanations were often drowned out by the more tantalizing narrative that Atlas was different, that it might be evidence of something far beyond natural law. The whisper spread not just in newspapers but in hearts. For some, it was a spark of wonder, proof that the universe might yet reveal neighbors. For others, it was disquieting, a reminder that humanity is small, fragile, unready for such knowledge. But for all, it was a whisper, that could not be ignored. Atlas was more than an object. It was a question flung across the dark. What if we are not alone? And though no signal came, though the object remained silent, the silence itself began to feel like part of the message. The arrival of Atlas inevitably conjured the memory of its infamous predecessor, Oumuamua, that first confirmed interstellar visitor, discovered in 2017, had passed like a shadow through the solar system, sparking astonishment and unease in equal measure. Astronomers recalled the elongated, cigar-like object, its mysterious acceleration, and the strange way it reflected light. Oumuamua had left behind not clarity, but debate, dividing the scientific world between those who saw only a natural fragment and those who dared to speak of alien craft. Atlas entered this history as an echo, a reminder that the universe still carried riddles that slipped past explanation. To compare the two was irresistible. Like Oumuamua, Atlas arrived uninvited, its orbit hyperbolic, its origin far beyond the grasp of the Sunday. Like Oumuamua, it challenged ordinary models, shimmering with anomalies that left astronomers uneasy. But there were differences as well. Oumuamua had been silent, dark, reflecting sunlight, without a comet's usual outburst of dust and gas. Atlas, in contrast, wore a veil of activity, a coma that seemed alive, yet inconsistent. It shone brighter than models allowed, then dimmed again, as if pulsing with some hidden rhythm. The comparison unsettled many because Oumuamua had left a wound in astronomy, a reminder of how little we knew. When it vanished into the dark, it carried its secrets with it, leaving only questions. Was it a shard of rock from another system's birth? Was it a fragment torn from a shattered world? Or, as some whispered, was it evidence of engineering, a relic of alien intent? The scientific community had argued fiercely, and the debate still lingered years later. Now Atlas reopened those arguments, like a half-healed scar torn fresh. For the public, the parallels were electrifying. Headlines framed Atlas as Oumuamua's sibling, the sequel, the second chance. If the first visitor had left too quickly for humanity to probe, perhaps this one would linger longer, offering data enough to pierce the veil. Amateur astronomers who had missed the chance to track Oumuamua now turned their telescopes eagerly toward Atlas, hoping to glimpse the enigma themselves. But for scientists, the echoes of Oumuamua were more sobering. That earlier object had revealed how unprepared humanity was for such encounters. No spacecraft had been ready to launch in time. No instruments had been designed with interstellar interlopers in mind. With Atlas, the same helplessness returned. The visitor was here, observable but unreachable, reminding humanity of its limitations. By the time missions could be conceived, designed, and launched, Atlas would be long gone. And so the shadow of Oumuamua framed every conversation about Atlas. If the first had been strange beyond measure, what did it mean that a second, equally strange, had arrived so soon? Was the universe filled with such wanderers, slipping constantly across our system unseen? Or was it mere coincidence that in a single generation, humanity had witnessed two? The comparison carried with it both awe and fear. Oumuamua had taught that the universe still had secrets. Atlas suggested those secrets were not rare, not hidden in ancient epochs, but happening now, in our time. To live in an age when the sky delivers such mysteries is a gift, and perhaps also a burden. The attempt to measure Atlas was like trying to sketch the outline of a ghost. Every instrument pointed at it, the wide-field surveys, the great ground-based telescopes, even smaller amateur rigs captured fragments of truth that never quite align. What astronomers sought was clarity, its size, its shape, its composition, its precise orbit. Yet with every measurement came contradiction, as though the object itself resisted being pinned down. Photometry, the science of measuring brightness, was the first tool. Atlas's light curve rose and fell with puzzling irregularity. Most comets brighten in a steady progression as they approach the sun, their icy surfaces warming, sublimating, releasing gas and dust that reflect sunlight. Atlas, however, flickered, its luminosity swelling beyond predictions, then dropping sharply, only to flare again. Some readings suggested a nucleus larger than expected. Others hinted at something fractured, perhaps multiple bodies tumbling together. The data did not resolve into one neat answer, but rather spread like branches of a tree, each leading somewhere uncertain. Spectroscopy, the passing of light into its chemical fingerprints, deepened the enigma. Ordinary comets carry familiar signs: water vapor, carbon dioxide, dust laced with silicates. Atlas bore some of these, but not in the expected proportions. Traces of exotic compounds appeared, whispering of formation in a stellar nursery unlike our own. One spectrum suggested a scarcity of carbon-based molecules where abundance should have been. Another hinted at a chemical balance never before recorded in solar system comets. If Atlas was natural, it was natural in a way foreign to our catalogue. Meanwhile, astronomers calculated its orbit with ever greater precision. The hyperbolic path was clear. It was not bound to the sun, not born here. But its velocity told a deeper story. Atlas had not merely wandered from a neighboring star. Its speed suggested ejection long ago, perhaps billions of years earlier, hurled out of a planetary system by the gravitational tug of giants, or even the death throes of a sun. It had drifted through interstellar space, untouched, until at last it brushed against ours. That alone was breathtaking, to observe something that had traveled through the void for epochs, carrying the history of an alien system in its atoms. And yet, the deeper the measurements, the less secure the conclusions. Some scientists insisted it was simply a fragmentary comet breaking apart under solar heat. Others countered that its erratic brightness could not be explained so easily. Still others suggested we were witnessing a kind of object never before classified, neither comet nor asteroid, but something new, a category, waiting to be named. The difficulty of measurement itself became part of the mystery. Instruments strained at the edges of their capacity, chasing a target dim, distant, and fleeting. Observatories shared data across continents, building a mosaic of glimpses. Each image was a puzzle piece, incomplete alone, but together forming a picture that was still strangely unfinished. For the public, the contradiction was irresistible. Was Atlas large or small, solid or fractured, natural or engineered? To scientists, such ambiguity was frustrating but also thrilling. For in science, the greatest discoveries often begin as anomalies, as signals that defy the expected. To measure the unknown is to risk being transformed by it. Atlas, in its stubborn refusal to conform, had already begun that transformation. As days turned into weeks, Atlas's path revealed a deeper strangeness. It was not merely its hyperbolic orbit expected of any interstellar traveler that disturbed astronomers. It was the way it moved along that path, as if something invisible tugged at it. When they compared its predicted position to where it actually appeared in the sky, tiny discrepancies emerged. At first, they could be dismissed as errors of measurement, the natural noise of observation. But as data accumulated, the pattern became undeniable. Atlas was accelerating, just slightly, in a way no simple cometary model could explain. Ordinary comets sometimes behave this way. Jets of gas erupting from their surface can act like thrusters, altering their trajectory. But in Atlas's case, the acceleration was oddly smooth, without the erratic jumps such jets usually produce. Moreover, its faint coma did not seem vigorous enough to generate the necessary force. The mathematics strained against the physics, as if Atlas obeyed rules unfamiliar to our solar system. The anomaly recalled a haunting precedent. Oumuamua's unexplained acceleration. That earlier interstellar visitor had also drifted away faster than gravity alone could dictate, sparking speculation that it might be propelled by something akin to a solar sail. Now Atlas appeared to echo the same enigma. Two interstellar bodies, two deviations, two invitations to question what we thought immutable. At professional conferences, debates grew heated. Some insisted the discrepancy was within acceptable margins, that cometary fragmentation or faint outgassing could account for it. Others pointed out the consistency of the deviation, its elegance, as though Atlas were gliding rather than stumbling. In hushed tones, a few dared suggest something artificial, a probe, a vessel, a machine disguised as rock and ice. Such ideas rarely made it into formal papers, yet they hovered like shadows over every conversation. For those who studied celestial mechanics, the anomaly carried a subtle terror. Newton's laws, Einstein's refinements, these were not supposed to falter at such scales, and yet the numbers seemed to hint at a force unaccounted for. Was it pressure from sunlight, stronger than expected due to an unusual surface structure? Was it a shape so thin and wide it caught photons like a sail? Or was it something not driven by physics as we knew it? The anomaly in motion was not dramatic. No one could see Atlas lurch across the sky. It was subtle, discernible only in decimals, in the quiet shift of predicted paths. But in that subtlety lay the greater power. For it is one thing when the universe surprises us with spectacle-flaring supernovae, colliding galaxies. It is another when the surprise comes not from brightness, but from precision, from the quiet betrayal of numbers against the laws we trusted. And so Atlas continued its silent glide, indifferent to human wonder, its motion a riddle written across the starfield, a reminder that the cosmos, vast and ancient, still held the power to bend not only trajectories but certainties. The growing unease within the astronomical community soon spilled outward into the world of ideas and argument. Atlas, once just a dim blot on sky surveys, became the spark for a widening circle of debate. In laboratories and observatories, in conference halls and late-night video calls, voices clashed not with hostility, but with a restless energy born of uncertainty. One camp held tightly to the natural explanation. They pointed to the history of astronomy. Every time a strange object had been encountered, a mundane explanation eventually prevailed. Halley's comet had once been considered an omen of doom. Now it was understood as an icy relic. Pulsars were first nicknamed LGM, Little Green Men, before being recognized as the collapsed hearts of massive stars. Why should Atlas be any different? The strange light curves, the faint yet smooth acceleration, surely these were quirks of cometary physics, magnified by distance and difficulty of observation. But another camp was not so easily satisfied. For them, Atlas bore too many contradictions, its behavior too elegant, too resistant to classification. They whispered of Oumuamua, that first unsettling visitor, and argued that the odds of two consecutive anomalies arriving within a generation were vanishingly small. Could it be coincidence, or was something deeper at play? In seminars, cautious voices suggested new physics, exotic ices sublimating in unexpected ways, or fractal dust structures catching sunlight more efficiently than known surfaces. Others, emboldened, suggested engineering. If one wished to design a vessel to drift invisibly among the stars, it might not look like the gleaming spacecraft of science fiction. It might resemble Atlas, faint, fragmentary, unassuming, a Trojan horse of rock and ice, concealing its purpose in plain sight. The debates reached beyond science into philosophy and culture. Ethicists asked whether humanity was prepared for the possibility of alien artifacts. Would discovery bring unity or division, hope or fear? Artists painted Atlas as a silent eye, a dark sail, a wandering cathedral, adrift in space. Writers spun stories of probes seeded by ancient civilizations, drifting between suns as cosmic ambassadors or silent scouts. At the heart of it all lay the tension between skepticism and wonder. Scientists are trained to doubt, to seek the simplest explanation, to resist the seduction of the extraordinary. And yet, the extraordinary has its own gravity, pulling at the imagination, refusing to be dismissed. The very strangeness of Atlas made it difficult to silence the speculation, difficult to cage the questions. For the public, the debate itself was intoxicating. They watched scientists argue not only with equations but with imagination, revealing the raw humanity behind the data. In the clash of interpretations, Atlas ceased to be just a speck in the sky. It became a mirror of human longing for certainty, for contact, for meaning in the cosmos. And so, even as telescopes continued their vigil, the true battleground became the realm of ideas. Was Atlas simply another comet, another visitor fated to fade into the night? Or was it a messenger, a sign that the universe was not silent, but alive with intention? The arguments did not resolve, they deepened, spreading like ripples from a stone cast into still water. Atlas, in its silence, had already divided us. The shape of Atlas became a matter of fierce speculation. From Earth, no telescope could resolve its body directly. It remained only a point of light, a trembling smear in long exposure images. But light itself carried whispers of form. By studying its fluctuations, its brightening and dimming as it spun, astronomers could reconstruct possible geometries. What emerged was not a single answer, but a spectrum of unsettling possibilities. The light curve hinted at elongation, a body stretched far beyond the proportions of familiar comets. Some models suggested it might be many times longer than it was wide, perhaps shaped like a spindle. Others, running the same data through different assumptions, imagined a flattened disk rotating like a coin tossed into the void. The uncertainty was maddening, yet in every case the models produced something bizarre. Ordinary comets tended toward irregular potato-like shapes. Atlas seemed more deliberate, more geometrically improbable. Shadow became as important as light. When Atlas passed against background stars, its dimming followed rhythms too smooth for chance. To some analysts, the regularity resembled engineered symmetry, as though flat panels or sharp edges reflected sunlight in ways a natural rock could not. To others, this was wishful thinking, the brain's tendency to see design in chaos. Yet the suspicion persisted. Atlas did not look like what it ought to be. Fragments of its coma complicated matters further. Streams of dust surrounded it, yet the outflow seemed uneven, as if venting from restricted points rather than broadly across its surface. This suggested a nucleus pocked with active regions, but skeptics noted the alignment of these vents with the object's rotation looked too tidy. Was this coincidence or intention? The debate spilled into simulation labs. Supercomputers churned through models of rotating bodies under sunlight, testing every conceivable shape. Some simulations produced bizarre needles spinning end over end, others vast sheets tumbling like sails. None matched perfectly, and yet all pointed to something strange. Atlas's geometry was unlike the catalogued forms of ordinary cometary fragments. Theories multiplied. One camp argued that Atlas was a natural shard from the collision of icy worlds, its geometry sculpted by violence. Another proposed that sublimation over billions of years in interstellar space had carved it into its current shape, like wind-hollowing stone in deserts. A more audacious minority whispered of sails, plates, or hulls, fragments not of geology, but of craft. Public fascination grew with each new hypothesis. Artists rendered Atlas as a celestial monolith, a jagged shard glowing green, a sailboat drifting through darkness. To gaze at these images was to confront possibility itself. What if the universe had architects beyond Earth? What if this was their signature, etched in silhouette against the stars? The shape of Atlas remained hidden, its true form known only to itself. Yet, in its refusal to reveal, it provoked reflection. Human beings, limited to a small planet, strained to infer meaning from flickers of light. Atlas, silent and distant, seemed almost to mock that effort. Was it laughing at our imagination or inviting it? The question of propulsion soon overshadowed all other debates. Atlas did not behave like a simple ball of ice pushed by sunlight into predictable arcs. Its acceleration was steady, its course almost elegant, as if guided by invisible hands. Scientists reached for the familiar explanation first: outgassing, the sublimation of buried ices exposed to solar heat. Jets of vapor could, in theory, act like thrusters, nudging the object with every outburst. But as data poured in, this theory grew harder to defend. Outgassing leaves signatures, comets display plumes and sprays, fountains of dust visible even through modest telescopes. Atlas, though faintly active, lacked such drama. Its coma was thin, its jets weak, insufficient to explain the smoothness of its drift. Worse, the direction of its acceleration did not always align with the jets observed. Something else seemed to be at work, something subtler than explosions of gas. The parallels with Oumuamua deepened unease. That first interstellar wanderer had also shown an inexplicable boost, as though driven by forces invisible. Then, some had suggested radiation pressure, the push of sunlight against a thin, broad surface might be enough. Could Atlas be the same? If so, it implied geometry beyond natural expectation, a wafer-like body, vast and flat, catching photons like a sail. But to many astronomers, this seemed absurd. Nature did not produce sails. The alien hypothesis lurked in the shadows of these discussions. If outgassing could not fully explain the acceleration, and if sunlight alone seemed insufficient, what remained? Was it possible that Atlas was designed an interstellar probe disguised as a comet, moving under control so subtle it escaped all but the most precise measurements? Few dared to voice the thought in official channels, but in private, the question surfaced again and again. Counterarguments arose just as quickly. Perhaps exotic ices, hydrogen or nitrogen were sublimating in ways earthbound laboratories could scarcely model. Perhaps the shape of Atlas's surface focused sunlight more efficiently than expected, creating a natural sail effect without the need for artifice. Or perhaps, critics argued, the anomaly itself was overstated, the product of tiny errors compounded in calculations across vast distances. Yet, doubt lingered. The mystery was not in the numbers alone, but in the pattern they formed. Atlas moved as if it knew its path, gliding smoothly when chaos was expected. And in that smoothness, some saw design. The public, hearing fragments of these debates, seized on the possibility of alien technology. News outlets whispered of hidden engines, of probes drifting silently among the stars. Documentaries spoke of cosmic messengers. Social media buzzed with speculation, blending science with imagination. To many, the details of coma chemistry or orbital mechanics mattered little. What mattered was the feeling that Atlas moved with purpose. For scientists, the challenge was sharper: how to balance skepticism with wonder, how to hold on to rigor when the universe tempted them with riddles that seemed almost scripted. Atlas offered no answers. It only moved, silent and indifferent, its propulsion hidden, its secrets intact. The whispers of propulsion and anomaly inevitably led back to the foundations of modern physics. When confronted with motions that defied simple cometary models, astronomers reached, almost instinctively, for the bedrock laid down by Einstein. For if gravity was not enough to account for Atlas's drift, then relativity, the great unifying principle of space, time, and motion, was the next reference point. Einstein's general relativity told us that every object moves along the curves of spacetime, guided by mass and energy. Atlas, too, should have obeyed those curves with absolute fidelity. Its hyperbolic path through the solar system, dictated by the sun's gravity, ought to have been calculable with exquisite precision. Yet, the faint discrepancies in its trajectory suggested that something else was whispering in the mathematics. Relativity had once transformed astronomy. It explained the precession of Mercury's orbit, the bending of starlight near the sun, the dilation of time around massive bodies. It had given birth to black holes and gravitational waves in the language of prediction long before instruments confirmed them. But Atlas seemed to sit awkwardly within its framework, not contradicting relativity outright, but hinting at some additional influence unaccounted for. Some theorists proposed subtle interactions with solar radiation, modeled through Einstein's own equations of momentum exchange. Light itself carries pressure, however delicate, and in the emptiness of interstellar space, that pressure can accumulate. If Atlas was thin or reflective in strange ways, relativity could allow for its glide. Yet the calculations required geometries that seemed almost too neat, too engineered. Others speculated that Atlas's anomalies were not flaws in Einstein's universe, but flaws in our instruments. Perhaps tiny errors in timekeeping, atmospheric distortions, or biases in data processing mimicked unexplained forces. Relativity remained intact, but the human attempt to measure within it faltered. Yet beneath the technical arguments lay a deeper unease. Relativity is not merely a theory, it is a worldview, a promise that the cosmos can be charted with logic and mathematics. When Atlas slipped through those equations with the grace of something foreign, it stirred an older fear that the universe might still hold surprises not just in detail but in principle. Physicists remembered how Einstein himself had spoken of mystery not as an inconvenience but as the most beautiful experience we can have. Mystery was the seed of true science. Atlas, in its subtle defiance, became a new seed. Did it whisper of physics yet to come? Did it hint at deeper structures of spacetime, or technologies that bent those structures with mastery? The name Atlas gained resonance here. In myth, the Titan bore the heavens upon his shoulders. This interstellar object seemed to carry, in miniature, the same burden, the weight of the heavens pressing against human understanding. Each deviation in its path was like a shrug, reminding us that our grasp of the cosmos rests on principles that may not be final. Thus, Atlas was not only a puzzle for astronomers, but a provocation to physicists. Einstein's legacy hovered like a guiding star, offering both reassurance and challenge. If relativity held, then Atlas was natural, its strangeness explainable. If relativity trembled, even slightly, then Atlas might be the doorway to a deeper truth. And so, beneath its silent drift, Atlas carried the question, is the universe still stranger than Einstein dreamed? The question of intelligence, once raised, could not be silenced. If Atlas moved with purpose, if its form hinted at design, then surely it might speak. And so, radio dishes turned toward it, their vast steel petals unfurling in deserts, on mountaintops, across the quiet places of Earth. The search was not new. SETI had aimed its ears at the sky for decades, but now, for the third time in history, humanity had a specific, physical target from another star. The Allen Telescope Array in California combed the frequencies. The venerable dish at Arecibo, before its tragic collapse, had once scanned similar visitors. In Australia, the park's observatory tuned its receivers, sensitive to whispers lost in the cosmic static. Each beam of data was sifted for order, the regular rhythm of a signal, the unnatural precision of narrowband transmission. Silence was expected, yet expectation did little to soften the hope. But silence was all that came. No pulses of mathematics, no repeating tones, no engineered signature hidden in the noise. Night after night, the computers spat out the same verdict: nothing. The radio skies were empty. And yet, even silence spoke. For silence can be its own kind of message. Perhaps Atlas was never meant to speak. Perhaps its design, if design it had, was stealth. A reconnaissance probe does not announce itself to its quarry. Or perhaps its voice was not tuned to our ears, broadcast in spectra beyond our grasp, or encoded in bursts of light and dust we mistook for natural phenomena. Scientists published their results with clinical precision. No artificial signals detected, but the public read between the lines. Silence, too, is ambiguous. Was it proof of natural origin or proof of cunning restraint? The absence of voice deepened, rather than eased, the mystery. Cultural echoes rippled outward. Poets wrote of a messenger too proud to speak. Musicians composed pieces built on silence, pauses stretched into haunting rhythms. Philosophers reminded us that the cosmos has never owed us communication. The universe is not obliged to answer questions simply because we ask. And still the dishes listened, for to turn away would feel like betrayal, betrayal of curiosity, betrayal of the chance, however slim, that we might hear another intelligence across the abyss. Even the silence of Atlas became addictive, like leaning close to a locked door, hoping for footsteps on the other side. In that silence lay a paradox. If Atlas was natural, then the quiet was expected. If it was not, then the quiet was deliberate. Both explanations held weight, neither offered certainty. The cosmos remained mute, withholding its secrets, as Atlas continued its glide. When the official designation 3I Atlas was announced, it came with the precision of astronomical nomenclature. Third interstellar object confirmed, named for the survey that first reported it. Yet numbers and acronyms could not contain the imagination. Very quickly, the name Atlas itself began to take hold, carrying with it a weight of myth that no string of letters and digits could rival. In Greek legend, Atlas was the titan condemned to bear the sky upon his shoulders, a punishment both eternal and sublime. The choice of name resonated more deeply than its discoverers perhaps intended. For here was an object that seemed to shoulder the heavens in its own way, a body flung across interstellar space, carrying with it secrets of origins no telescope could yet unveil. Just as the Titan stood at the boundary between Earth and cosmos, so too did this Atlas mark the threshold between our solar system and the deep unknown. The symbolism did not escape notice. Journalists seized on the mythic imagery, describing Atlas as the bearer of worlds, the carrier of cosmic burdens, a messenger of the gods. Artists rendered it as a glowing shard cradled in the hands of a giant. Philosophers used the metaphor to suggest that Atlas bore not only its own enigma, but also the weight of human longing, the need to believe that the universe holds stories beyond our own. Within the scientific community, the name also became a shorthand for the object's strangeness. To speak of Atlas was to evoke not just coordinates and orbital elements, but the entire weight of its mystery, its fluctuating brightness, its anomalous acceleration, its refusal to fit into neat categories. The mythic Titan became an unspoken metaphor for the burden the object placed upon science itself, the strain of trying to explain what resisted explanation. Names have always shaped our relationship with the heavens. Jupiter, Saturn, Venus, Mars, all planetary names carry myths that color how we imagine them. Oumuamua, meaning scout in Hawaiian, had invited thoughts of messengers and reconnaissance. Borisov had been tethered to its discoverer's identity, grounding it in human effort. But Atlas was archetypal. To call it such was to acknowledge that it was not only an object of study, but a symbol, a story, a burden humanity must shoulder in turn. For in naming, humans reveal their hopes. The Titan Atlas carried the vault of heaven. This new Atlas carried within it the possibility that we are not alone, that the universe is not silent stone but alive with intention. Whether natural shard or engineered artifact, Atlas became more than itself the moment the name was spoken. And so, even as telescopes tracked it across the sky, Atlas lived equally in myth. The numbers and equations described its path, but the name carried its meaning. Like the Titan of legend, it stood between heaven and earth, reminding us of the weight of knowledge and of mystery that humanity must bear. The silence of Atlas stirred memories of warnings that had long haunted the discourse of cosmic contact. Foremost among them were the words of Stephen Hawking, who had often cautioned that reaching out to alien civilizations might not end as humanity hoped. To him, the story of Earth's own past was warning enough. When advanced cultures met those less advanced, the encounters rarely ended in kindness. The ships of colonizers brought not wisdom but conquest, not exchange but domination. If the cosmos held minds older, stronger, more technologically potent than ours, why should they treat us differently? And so, in Atlas's strange behavior, some saw an echo of Hawking's admonition. If it was artificial, if it were a probe or fragment of alien design, then its silence might not be innocence. It might be strategy. A scout does not announce itself. A surveyor does not call to its quarry. To imagine Atlas as alien was also to imagine it as cautious, as deliberate, as testing the waters of our solar system without revealing its intent. The scientific community did not speak of such fears openly. To do so risked sensationalism, the loss of credibility. Yet, in quiet conversations, in the margins of conferences, some admitted that the possibility carried a certain chill. What if interstellar visitors were not accidents of physics, but purposeful encounters? What if we had already been noticed? For the public, these warnings played differently. Some embraced them as thrill, the drama of a universe alive with watchful eyes. Others recoiled, unsettled by the notion that humanity might be under quiet observation, powerless to respond. In documentaries and editorials, Hawking's warning was repeated like a refrain: be careful what you wish for. But philosophers countered with another perspective. To shrink from the possibility of contact, they argued, was to deny the very essence of curiosity. Human history was not only conquest, it was also exchange, growth, the weaving of cultures into greater complexity. Might the universe too hold neighbors who approached with curiosity rather than violence? Might Hawking's caution, though wise, also blind us to wonder? Atlas, silent in its glide, embodied that tension. Was its quietness a sign of indifference or of watchfulness? Was it natural debris that stirred fear only because humans projected intention onto it? Or was it something more? A presence both alluring and dangerous. Hawking had framed the dilemma clearly. To listen is safe, to shout is peril. Atlas forced the question again, not in abstract thought, but in the tangible form of an object passing through our sky. Humanity was no longer only a dreamer of contact, it was a witness to enigmas that might already be the first notes of dialogue or of warning. And so, beneath its name, beneath its silence, Atlas carried another weight, the echo of Hawking's voice, urging us to tread carefully, to remember that the universe is vast, and not all encounters are kind. The more astronomers studied Atlas, the more it seemed to slip past the neat boundaries of known cometary life. Ordinary comets follow a familiar cycle. Icy reservoirs in the deep freeze of space awaken when nudged inward. sublimating into bright comet and long tails, then fading again as they retreat. Their brightness curves, their jets of gas, their fragmentations, though sometimes unpredictable, belong to a pattern honed by centuries of observation. Atlas refused to honor that pattern. Its activity bloomed where it should have been quiet, surging in brilliance at unexpected distances from the Sunday. Then, just as abruptly, it dimmed, as though retreating from the very forces that should have stirred it. Its tail, faint and fleeting, did not align with predictions. The coma seemed to breathe irregularly, expanding and collapsing in a rhythm more like a pulse than a chemical reaction. Some astronomers speculated that Atlas contained exotic ices, hydrogen, nitrogen, or compounds unseen in local comets that sublimated in ways our models could not anticipate. Others argued that its structure was too fragile, a fractal lattice that fractured under minimal stress, producing bursts of dust that mimicked intentionality. Yet each theory felt incomplete, a patch upon a fabric tearing in too many places at once. More unsettling still were the patterns of its acceleration. Jets of vapor usually leave fingerprints, irregular kicks, stuttering deviations. Atlas's acceleration was smooth, graceful, almost unnaturally consistent. It was as though the laws of cometary physics bent politely out of its way. In quiet corners, scientists admitted that this smoothness felt wrong, as if they were watching a choreography rather than a collapse. The object also violated expectations of decay. Typical comets fragment visibly as their nuclei weaken, shedding pieces in dramatic outbursts. Atlas hinted at fracture, but held together longer than models allowed, resisting disintegration. It carried itself with a resilience uncanny for a natural shard adrift for millions of years. These contradictions unsettled not only astronomy, but also philosophy. For if Atlas was natural, then its strangeness revealed how parochial our knowledge remained, how little of the cosmos we had actually sampled. Perhaps the majority of interstellar bodies were unlike anything we had catalogued at home. If so, Atlas was not an outlier, but a herald of a broader truth, that the laws we trusted were provincial, shaped by one star, one system, one cradle. But if it was not natural, if its behavior stemmed from design, then the implications were more profound still. A constructed object masquerading as a comet would mean someone somewhere had chosen to mimic nature so precisely that we mistook it at first glance. To break natural law is one thing, to bend it deliberately is another. Either way, Atlas forced humility. It showed that the categories by which humanity organizes the cosmos are provisional, fragile. Natural law, as we understand it, is a map, not the territory. And sometimes the map must be redrawn, not in pencil, but in awe. Instead of fading quietly as comets often do, Atlas astonished astronomers by growing brighter. Each passing night brought reports of a luminous swell, as though the visitor were awakening rather than decaying. Its magnitude surpassed predictions, glowing in ways that left models scrambling to keep pace. Some declared it a natural outburst, a fragile nucleus crumbling and releasing vast plumes of dust. Yet the timing unsettled many, for the outbursts did not align neatly with its distance from the Sunday. Atlas seemed to blaze according to its own internal clock. Ordinary comets brighten as sunlight warms their icy skins, driving jets of vapor into expanding comet. The effect is gradual, predictable, linked to solar proximity. Atlas defied this rhythm. Its flare-ups were abrupt, disproportionate, and strangely sustained. When it should have dimmed, it intensified. When stability was expected, it fractured with a brilliance that bordered on defiance. To some, it felt as if the object were responding, reacting not merely to physics, but to something unseen, something deliberate. The escalation of mystery triggered a wave of excitement and unease in equal measure. In scientific circles, papers multiplied, each proposing mechanisms that strained at the limits of plausibility. Some argued that Atlas was fragmenting internally, breaking apart like a cathedral collapsing in slow motion, each crack releasing a burst of brilliance. Others speculated about reflective dust layers, engineered perhaps, that amplified sunlight like a mirror. Still others invoked exotic chemistry, substances rare or absent in our system but perhaps common elsewhere. The public, less restrained by caution, wove wilder tales. Was Atlas powering up? Was it a vessel unfurling sails of light, preparing to depart? Was it a beacon, flaring brighter to announce its presence or to signal across the interstellar dark? The media seized on these stories, blurring the line between speculation and narrative. Amid the fervor, telescopes strained harder than ever. Photometers measured the rises and falls with obsessive care. Spectrographs hunted for chemical fingerprints hidden within the glow. What emerged was maddening. Signals of water, ice, yes, but also anomalies, traces that defied straightforward interpretation, hinting at compounds either rare or wholly new. The comet was bright, but its message was obscured, as though it spoke in a language not yet understood. The escalation was not only scientific but emotional. For humanity, Atlas became less a point of light and more a stage. Onto it were projected hopes of contact, fears of surveillance, dreams of cosmic belonging. The brighter it grew, the more it demanded interpretation. To witness its swelling luminosity was to feel the weight of possibility pressing closer, as though the universe itself were whispering louder, daring us to listen. But brightness is not clarity. Light can illuminate, but it can also blind. And Atlas, in its dazzling growth, offered not resolution but paradox. The more it shone, the darker the questions grew. The spectrum of Atlas became a battleground of clues. Through the prisms of observatories, its light unraveled into colors and lines, fingerprints of the elements it carried. Astronomers leaned close to the data, seeking familiar patterns: water, carbon dioxide, silicates, the standard signatures of a cometary body. Yet what they found both reassured and unsettled. Yes, there were traces of ordinary ices sublimating under solar heat, confirming that Atlas bore some kinship to comets. But the balance was wrong. Carbon-based molecules, so common in comets born within our solar system, appeared strangely scarce. Instead, exotic compounds whispered from the data, faint yet persistent, hinting at chemical recipes unfamiliar to local space. A flare of cyanogen here, an unusual proportion of oxygen there, ingredients that suggested birth under different stellar conditions. One analysis proposed that Atlas had formed near a red dwarf star, where cooler temperatures and unique radiation fields sculpted chemistry alien to our Sunday. Another speculated that it had drifted from the shattered remains of a giant planet's icy moon, carrying a chemical heritage lost to us. Yet each hypothesis left gaps. The fingerprints were incomplete, as though smudged deliberately, revealing just enough to provoke, but never enough to confirm. The anomalies deepened when infrared data were compared. Certain wavelengths, which should have lit up with dust emissions, were strangely muted. Other bands flared unexpectedly, as though Atlas carried materials with spectral properties beyond our catalogue. Some dared to wonder if those signatures were not natural at all, if they hinted at composites or alloys, remnants of something engineered. Most dismissed the thought, but it lingered like a shadow in every discussion. The mysteries of spectrum were not new. When pulsars were first discovered, their rhythmic signals suggested artificial origin before being revealed as neutron stars. When quasars appeared, their spectral lines baffled astronomers until redshift unlocked the secret of their distance. History cautioned patience. Anomalies could herald new natural categories. Yet patience was harder to hold. when the anomalies lay within an interstellar visitor, here for only a brief passage before fading forever. To the public, the phrase chemical fingerprints carried an almost forensic weight. Atlas became a cosmic crime scene, its spectrum the evidence. Was it the remnant of alien geology or the relic of alien technology? Was it a shard of a dead star system or a clue left deliberately, waiting for us to notice? The scientific papers, cautious and meticulous, listed ratios and uncertainties, but between the lines pulsed a quieter truth. Atlas smelled of elsewhere. It was not just a piece of ice and dust, it was a sample of another cradle of matter, carrying the perfume of alien birthplaces. Whether natural or not, it was a revelation. And in those spectral secrets, the enigma deepened. The light of Atlas was both message and mask, telling us where it might have come from, and reminding us how far we were from truly knowing. As data poured in from telescopes worldwide, astronomers turned to their most powerful allies, simulations. Supercomputers, humming in quiet laboratories, were tasked with reconstructing Atlas's every move, its spin, its path, its subtle changes in brightness. The goal was to take the raw, contradictory numbers and breathe coherence into them. Yet coherence proved elusive. Models began with the assumption that Atlas was a comet-like body, irregular, icy, tumbling through space. But when researchers fed in its light curves, the simulated objects behaved chaotically, flashing too quickly, dimming too sharply. Adjustments were made, stretching its shape, flattening it, hollowing its center, but none matched the measured smoothness of Atlas's real behavior. The simulations strained, as though the object itself refused to be imitated. Orbital dynamics, too, resisted prediction. Under pure gravity, Atlas's hyperbolic escape should have been elegantly calculable. Yet when its slight accelerations were added, the simulated trajectories diverged. Outgassing jets produced lurches too irregular, solar radiation pressure demanded geometries too extreme. In many runs, the models spun apart entirely, producing fragments that scattered into non-existent tails. Reality seemed subtler, stranger, than the mathematics allowed. Some researchers pushed the boundaries further. They tested fractal nuclei, fragile snowflake structures that crumbled piece by piece, releasing dust in controlled cascades. Others imagined hollow shells, their interiors resonating like bells when struck by solar heat. A few, daring to court ridicule, coded models of sail-like sheets, paper-thin, drifting with the steady grace of photon pressure. Each produced tantalizing echoes of the truth, but none achieved a satisfying fit. The frustration was palpable. Scientists are accustomed to anomalies resolving under the pressure of iteration. Usually, better data sharpens the models. Usually, more computing power clarifies. With Atlas, the opposite seemed true. The sharper the data, the wider the gap. Supercomputers churned through millions of permutations, yet the object remained just out of reach, like a reflection that shifted when one leaned closer. For philosophers of science, this struggle carried symbolic weight. The simulation effort became a mirror of humanity's relationship with the cosmos. Relentless effort, sophisticated tools, and still the abyss of ignorance staring back. Was Atlas truly so complex? Or were humans trying to fit it into patterns it was never meant to occupy? Perhaps, they argued, the failure lay not in the data, but in the frameworks themselves. Meanwhile, the public heard simplified versions of these struggles. Headlines declared, "Supercomputers can't explain Atlas, casting the enigma as a kind of digital defeat." Artists imagined computers spitting out fractured shapes, screens filled with chaotic spirals. To many, the failure of simulation was itself evidence of otherness, a suggestion that Atlas could not be of nature because nature should be knowable. In truth, the failure was more nuanced. not a breakdown of science, but a reminder of its limits. Atlas forced supercomputers to admit humility, to confess that the cosmos contains behaviors beyond present understanding. The struggle did not resolve the mystery, but it deepened it, leaving the sense that Atlas was not only a visitor from elsewhere in space, but also from elsewhere in comprehension. As simulations faltered and natural explanations grew strained, a bolder strain of thought began to surface. Perhaps Atlas was not a comet at all, but a construct. What if its strange geometry, its smooth acceleration, its spectral oddities were not accidents of physics, but the fingerprints of engineering? Theories of alien technology are rarely spoken aloud in professional circles, yet Atlas seemed to invite them. A few researchers, recalling the arguments around Oumuamua, suggested it could be a solar sail, a thin, vast sheet designed to drift across interstellar gulfs, propelled not by chemical fuel but by the steady pressure of starlight. Such a structure would explain the smoothness of Atlas's acceleration, its refusal to fragment, its uncanny resilience. If so, it might not be a traveler lost, but a traveler guided. Others proposed more exotic ideas. Perhaps Atlas was a probe disguised in cometary clothing, a deliberate camouflage to evade detection, blending into the cosmic debris until intelligent eyes stumbled upon it. Or perhaps it was not functional at all, but a relic, an artifact left adrift, the broken shard of a civilization long gone, its purpose erased by time. One particularly audacious theory imagined it as a data capsule, its core encoding knowledge in molecular patterns, waiting to be intercepted by a curious species. Speculative papers circulated at the margins, most unsigned or presented under pseudonyms, their authors wary of ridicule. But outside academia, the idea caught fire. Documentaries painted Atlas as a messenger. Novels cast it as a scout from a galactic network. Online forums debated whether it might be observing us even now, transmitting reports back to its makers in wavelengths our instruments could not catch. The notion of engineering carried both wonder and dread. For if Atlas was designed, then its presence meant intention, and intention implied intelligence, perhaps benevolent, perhaps indifferent, perhaps predatory. Was it here to learn, to warn, to test our readiness? Or was it only a drifting relic, its makers long since vanished into cosmic silence? Skeptics urged caution. Extraordinary claims, they reminded, demand extraordinary evidence. Nothing in the data proved artifice. Every anomaly could still be stretched to fit natural models, however uncomfortably. But imagination is not so easily restrained, and the more Atlas defied explanation, the more compelling the engineered hypothesis became. In the end, the theories revealed less about Atlas and more about humanity. To some, the possibility of alien technology was exhilarating, a sign that the universe might be alive with intelligence. To others, it was terrifying, a reminder of our fragility. Either way, Atlas had become a mirror for our dreams and fears. It glided on in silence, betraying nothing, but its very presence whispered a question too large to ignore. What if we were not the first to build sails, to launch probes, to scatter artifacts into the dark? What if Atlas was not only a visitor from another star, but from another mind? As speculation about alien engineering gathered momentum, a counter-movement rose just as forcefully. For every astronomer willing to entertain the extraordinary, there were many more determined to anchor Atlas firmly within the realm of nature. Skeptics warned that the human mind is a pattern-seeking instrument, too eager to see design where none exists. History, they argued, was filled with false alarms, pulsars mistaken for signals, canals imagined on Mars, shadows interpreted as faces on the moon. Why should Atlas not be another entry in that lineage of overreach? Papers appeared offering naturalistic explanations, each more inventive than the last. Some argued that Atlas was nothing more than a fragile cometary fragment, a piece of an interstellar iceberg breaking apart in the heat of the Sunday. Its strange brightness surges could be explained by chunks crumbling off its surface, exposing fresh ice to vaporize in sudden bursts. Others proposed that the thinness of its coma simply made it harder to model, giving the illusion of anomalies where none existed. Still others looked to dust. Perhaps the object's nucleus was coated in highly reflective grains, amplifying sunlight in unpredictable ways. The supposed smooth acceleration might be nothing more than the cumulative push of uneven jets of gas, averaged over time into deceptive elegance. One team suggested that fractal ice, structures like cosmic snowflakes, could fracture in patterns that mimicked deliberate control. To skeptics, the need for aliens dissolved once imagination was applied to physics. The rhetoric sharpened as media coverage fueled public fascination. Scientists wary of sensationalism bristled at headlines declaring Atlas a possible probe. They accused journalists of distorting nuance, of blurring the line between data and fantasy. In press releases, words were chosen with surgical care: anomalous, unexpected, difficult to reconcile, never alien. But skeptics were not immune to unease. For while natural models abounded, none fit perfectly. Each explanation solved part of the puzzle while leaving other parts untouched. Fragmentation explained the flares but not the smoothness of acceleration. Reflective dust explained brightness but not chemical anomalies. Exotic ices explained sublimation patterns but not geometry. To skeptics, Atlas was an awkward comet. To dreamers, it was an elegant machine. The divide lay not only in evidence, but in temperament. The public, witnessing these debates, saw something rare. Scientists in visible disagreement, their doubts and imaginations laid bare. Some sided with caution, preferring the comfort of natural law. Others leaned toward wonder, unwilling to dismiss the possibility of design. In this tension, Atlas became more than an object. It became a story of how humanity confronts mystery. Ultimately, skeptics sought to remind the world of humility. Extraordinary claims should not be built upon incomplete data, they insisted. Science advances not by embracing the wildest possibility, but by resisting it until no other explanation remains. To leap too quickly into alien narratives was to betray the rigor that makes discovery possible. Yet, ironically, this very resistance kept the debate alive. For every naturalistic model was a tacit admission that Atlas had unsettled the known. Even skeptics, in their caution, conceded that this was no ordinary comet, and so Atlas continued its silent role as arbiter of human division, some clinging to the safe, some reaching for the extraordinary. It drifted on, indifferent to both camps, while Earth argued below. As the debates swirled between natural and artificial explanations, a different thread of thought emerged from the fringes of theoretical physics. What if Atlas's anomalies were not signs of engineering at all, but whispers of the quantum fabric itself? Physicists had long speculated that the vacuum of space was not empty but alive, seething with fluctuations, virtual particles blinking in and out of existence, quantum fields shimmering beneath the calm. To most objects, these effects average out, invisible on macroscopic scales. But perhaps Atlas, with its unusual shape or composition, was sensitive to this hidden sea. Could its motion be the first faint sign of quantum forces expressing themselves on cosmic scales? One proposal suggested that Atlas was interacting with the zero-point energy of the vacuum, its surface geometry amplifying effects too subtle for ordinary matter. In this view, its smooth acceleration was not thrust but resonance, a harmonic response to spacetime's own fluctuations. Another idea linked Atlas to hypothetical quantum sails materials thin enough to respond not only to starlight, but to the restless pressure of quantum fields themselves. Such a craft, if engineered, would seem almost magical. If natural, it would rewrite our understanding of matter. More radical still were whispers of false vacuum decay, the idea that our universe's current state is metastable, a bubble that could collapse into a deeper energy well. If Atlas carried traces of exotic matter from a system where such transitions had begun, its chemistry and behavior might reflect laws slightly askew from our own. To imagine this was to gaze into a mirror of annihilation, a reminder that even the vacuum could betray us. Skeptics dismissed such theories as mathematical indulgence, yet others argued that the anomalies of Atlas were precisely the kind of cracks through which new physics might reveal itself. For decades, cosmology had been chasing the unseen: dark matter, dark energy, hidden dimensions, perhaps interstellar objects, drifting across gulfs of space, carried with them not only alien chemistry but alien physics. The public found these speculations harder to grasp, yet all the more tantalizing. Words like quantum vacuum and false decay filtered into headlines, translated into metaphors of ghosts and doomsday bubbles. Atlas became a character in a cosmic drama where the stage itself, space, time, reality, was unstable. Philosophers reflected on the irony. Humanity had always looked to the stars for signs of intelligence, of neighbors, but perhaps the greater message was not from other minds but from the universe itself, speaking in equations rather than words. Perhaps Atlas was not a messenger of aliens but of physics, carrying in its strange behavior the proof that our map of reality was incomplete. Whether one believed in probes or in quantum sails, the effect was the same. Atlas deepened the sense that the cosmos was not finished, not solved, not domesticated by science. It was alive with riddles, waiting to be read. From physics, the imagination leapt outward still further, into the vastest of speculations, the multiverse. If Atlas seemed alien to our solar system, if its chemistry, its motion, its very behavior strained against known categories, then perhaps it was not only from another star, but from another universe altogether. The idea was audacious, yet it drew upon real cosmological theories. Inflationary models of the early cosmos suggest that our universe may be but one bubble among countless others, each with its own laws, constants, and histories. Most bubbles remain forever isolated, their light unable to cross the gulfs. But what if debris could slip between? What if Atlas were such a fragment, an exile from another universe, flung across the seam where realities brushed? Some physicists entertain the notion half seriously, pointing to its spectral oddities, the unusual balance of compounds, the whispers of elements in strange proportions. Could these be the fingerprints of laws slightly different from our own? If carbon ratios seemed off, if sublimation behaved strangely, perhaps it was not only a matter of distant stellar nurseries, but of an entirely different physics. Others pushed the idea further. If Atlas was indeed inter-universal debris, might it not be evidence that collisions between cosmoses occur? The boundaries between universes, imagined as membranes in higher dimensional space, might occasionally rupture, releasing fragments into one another. In this vision, Atlas was not a visitor from another star, but from another reality, a shard of a world governed by rules our science could only guess. To skeptics, the multiverse explanation bordered on metaphysics. There was no way to test it, no way to distinguish between a shard from another star and a shard from another universe. Yet even they admitted that Atlas, by refusing ordinary classification, invited such expansive thought. For the public, the idea was intoxicating. Atlas was cast as a refugee from another creation, a message in matter from realities we could never visit. It became myth once again, a stone fallen through worlds, a cosmic seed blown across boundaries we could not see. Artists imagined shattered membranes, with glowing shards like Atlas drifting between them, silent ambassadors of other realities. Philosophers seized on the metaphor. If Atlas belonged to another universe, then its arrival reminded us that boundaries are porous, that the fabric of reality may not be as sealed as we believe. It was not merely a comet or a probe, it was the embodiment of possibility, proof that existence itself could be larger than imagination. Atlas, indifferent to these interpretations, continued its glide. Yet in its silence, it seemed to hold the multiverse within it, daring us to consider not only other stars, but other laws, other beginnings, other ends. With speculations soaring into multiverses and quantum seas, the scientific response on Earth grew more pragmatic. Listen harder. If Atlas concealed secrets in silence, then perhaps finer ears could catch what broader ones had missed. Around the world, radio arrays and optical networks sharpened their focus. The hunt was not for voices, as we imagined them know hello in Morse code, but for any anomaly, any rhythmic flicker or unnatural coherence in the noise. The Very Large Array in New Mexico, its dishes sweeping in synchrony, extended its range of frequencies. Breakthrough Listen, the ambitious program scanning the skies for signs of intelligence, devoted long hours to Atlas's trajectory. Laser observatories, usually aimed at exoplanet searches, turned instruments toward its faint shimmer, testing whether flashes of coherent light betrayed deliberate signaling. Optical networks strung between continents shared their data in near real time, stitching together an almost continuous watch. To the untrained eye, the results were blank. No obvious pulses, no beacon shining from the interstellar dark. But to analysts combing through the terabytes of data, the silence was layered with complexity. There were bursts of radio static, but too irregular to be artificial. There were glimmers of light variations, but too faint to rise above noise. Again and again, candidate signals dissolved under scrutiny, collapsing into natural explanations. Yet the intensity of the search itself mattered. For the first time, humanity coordinated a global campaign not only to observe an interstellar visitor, but to interrogate it, to ask with all available tools, "Are you alone in your silence?" The question was not only scientific, but existential. If Atlas were a probe, if it carried an intelligence beyond ours, then perhaps it chose not to reply. But if it were natural, then listening was still worthwhile, for even natural bodies carry stories of alien chemistry, alien starbirth, alien geographies. The effort became a ritual. Each night, banks of computers passed signals. Each dawn, astronomers reviewed the plots, jagged lines, spectral peaks, rhythmic dips. Each day, conclusions were the same, no message yet, and still the instruments listened, because to stop listening would feel like surrender. The public followed these efforts with fascination, though not always with patience. Headlines announced new anomalies, only to retract them days later. Conspiracy theories spread, claiming that signals had been detected and suppressed. For some, the lack of a message was proof of cover-up. For others, it was evidence of deliberate concealment by Atlas itself. Silence became a screen upon which every imagination projected. But within the scientific community, the silence was treated differently, not as failure, but as data. To hear nothing is also to know something. That no strong beacons were aimed at Earth, that no deliberate laser signals pierced the dark, that if intelligence was involved, it hid in subtler channels. Negative results narrowed the possibilities, shaping the contours of the mystery. And so the listening continued, patient, relentless, reverent. The cosmos had spoken before through pulsars, through quasars, through the faint hiss of the microwave background. If Atlas had nothing to say, then at least humanity would know It had asked the question with open ears. Night after night, the instruments spoke the same verdict. Nothing. No repeating pulse. No narrowband signal. No engineered coherence hiding in the static. Atlas, if it carried secrets, kept them locked away. And so the silence itself became part of the mystery, a presence as tangible as any sound. In science, silence is not emptiness, it is evidence. The lack of radio chatter narrowed possibilities. No powerful transmitter beaming at Earth, no obvious beacon announcing presence. If Atlas were artificial, then it was quiet by design, perhaps a stealthy scout gathering without revealing, perhaps a derelict relic, long since dead, its voice extinguished. Or perhaps a probe so advanced, it spoke in channels we could not yet imagine: neutrinos, gravitational ripples, or codes hidden in fluctuations of dust and light. But silence is also suggestive. To some, it was a sign of indifference, as if the cosmos itself shrugged at our curiosity. To others, it was deliberate restraint, a performance of invisibility. The absence of a message became as haunting as the possibility of one, a kind of cosmic theatre where what was unsaid carried more weight than words. Philosophers turned to metaphor. They compared Atlas to a stranger passing through a crowded room without a glance, a visitor who neither greets nor confronts, but whose very presence unsettles. Was the silence an insult, a dismissal of humanity as irrelevant? Or was it mercy, the silence of restraint, a choice to remain hidden until we were ready? The public, too, wrestled with the quiet. Forums filled with speculation. What if Atlas is watching us, but chooses not to speak? What if silence is the message that we are alone, that no one cares, that the universe is vast and indifferent? Others flipped the interpretation. Silence meant wisdom, the discipline of an elder civilization that knew the dangers of contact. Scientists, careful to avoid such leaps, noted instead the resilience of mystery. Silence had not clarified Atlas's nature, but it had sharpened the sense of wonder. The absence of data was not a void, it was a mirror reflecting our fears and longings. Each null result forced humanity to confront its own expectations. Did we hope for companionship? Did we dread discovery? Did we crave proof or ambiguity? Atlas continued on, indifferent, a silent brushstroke against the stars. Its silence, far from empty, was heavy with implication. The cosmos had offered us a question wrapped in quiet, and humanity found itself speaking into the void, listening for echoes that never came. And yet, the listening did not stop, for silence too can one day break. As Atlas glided deeper into the solar system, a new urgency stirred in the minds of engineers and mission planners. Observing from Earth was not enough. If this truly was a messenger from beyond, natural or not, then to touch it, to sample it, would be to touch another star system directly. Proposals began to circulate. Intercept missions, rapid response probes, spacecraft designed to chase Atlas before it slipped forever into interstellar night. The dream was intoxicating. Imagine a probe launched on a trajectory to rendezvous, capturing close-up images of its surface, measuring its mass directly, perhaps even returning fragments to Earth. It would be a scientific revolution, a leap beyond anything yet achieved. Atlas, unlike meteors or distant planets, carried not only the story of itself but of another birthplace, another cosmic nursery. To hold its matter in human hands would be to read the geology of alien suns. Yet the practicalities were merciless. Atlas moved fast tens of kilometers per second on a hyperbolic path that gave no second chances. To intercept it required speeds beyond current launch vehicles, trajectories plotted with brutal precision, and missions conceived in months rather than decades. By the time proposals reached draft form, Atlas would already be gone, dwindling in brightness as it retreated toward the void. Still, the vision refused to fade. NASA researchers discussed ready-to-fly interceptors, small spacecraft on standby, ready to launch whenever the next interstellar object appeared. Others proposed piggybacking on existing missions, bending them toward visitors with quick burns. Some even imagined swarms of tiny solar sails deployed in advance, lying in wait like cosmic nets for whatever trespassed next. Atlas inspired not only questions but architecture, a blueprint for how humanity might one day answer interstellar riddles directly. For the public, these proposals became stories of missed opportunity. Commentators lamented that we were too slow, too bound by bureaucracy to grasp the gifts the cosmos offered. We let it slip away, they said, as though Atlas were a ship that passed without boarding. Yet to engineers, the lesson was sharper. The universe would not wait. If humanity wanted to meet such visitors, it must be ready in advance, with tools prepared for the unknown. And so, though no probe would meet Atlas, its passage planted seeds. Plans for intercept missions were drawn more seriously than ever before. Funding requests hinted at urgency. Space agencies began to speak in new terms, not if, but when. For if Atlas was the third, there would be a fourth, a fifth, a steady rain of wanderers from the interstellar dark. Next time, we might not be caught unready. Atlas moved on, unreachable, but it left behind a challenge. Prepare. Be ready when the next mystery comes, because the cosmos is not finished sending them. Even as engineers debated unreachable missions, a quieter realization dawned. The enigma of Atlas revealed as much about humanity as it did about the object itself. Each anomaly, each unexplained flicker, had been met not only with equations but with projection. Into Atlas, people poured their longings, their fears, their archetypes of hope and doom. It became less a comet or probe, and more a mirror, reflecting the state of our own civilization. Scientists saw in it the limits of their instruments, the fragility of data at cosmic scales. Some admitted frustration, that so much effort could yield so little certainty. Yet in that very humility lay a lesson. Atlas reminded science that the universe was not tame, not domesticated by theory, but alive with riddles. To wrestle with mystery was not failure but fidelity to curiosity. For philosophers, Atlas became a parable of perspective. Its silence, its refusal to fit categories, forced humanity to confront the narrowness of its definitions. Was it a comet? An artifact? Something between? Perhaps our insistence on binaries, natural or artificial, alive or inert, was the true limitation. Atlas exposed how language strains against the unknown, how categories bend when reality resists simplicity. For artists and writers, it became symbol. Poems likened it to a messenger who passes without words, leaving only presence. Paintings rendered it as a glowing shard in endless night, a fragment of something greater. Novels imagined civilizations that scatter objects like seeds, not to invade, but to remind others they are not alone. Atlas fed imagination as much as it fed telescopes. And for ordinary people, gazing through news headlines or backyard telescopes, Atlas became a story of longing. Some hoped it was proof of neighbors among the stars. Others feared it was a harbinger, a scout for forces indifferent or hostile. But whether framed in hope or fear, both revealed the same truth. Humanity aches for connection, for meaning beyond its fragile world. In this way, Atlas functioned as a kind of cosmic Rorschach test. It showed not itself, but us, our hunger for explanation, our tendency to weave myth into data, our refusal to leave mystery alone. In its silence, it drew out our voices. In its strangeness, it revealed our imagination. Perhaps that was its true gift. Whether natural fragment or crafted probe, Atlas had already fulfilled a purpose. It forced humanity to look inward, even as it gazed outward, to see in the night sky not only an alien visitor, but the contours of its own restless mind. Despite the human tendency to drape Atlas in metaphor, the scientists never let go of their task: measure, calculate, refine. With every night of observation, more data poured in, and again the numbers carried the same unsettling refrain: its motion did not align with pure gravity. The discrepancy was small, subtle, detectable only through the most meticulous tracking. Yet, in astronomy, even the faintest deviation can carry revolutionary weight. The tests became almost ritualistic. Observatories compared their findings across continents, adjusting for atmospheric interference, recalibrating instruments. Again and again, the trajectory resisted neat alignment. The sun's gravity accounted for most of the path, yes, but not all of it. Something else nudged Atlas along. Theories piled high. Solar radiation pressure remained the leading candidate. Photons, massless yet relentless, push gently on objects. For most bodies, the effect is negligible. But if Atlas were oddly shaped flat, wide, or hollow, it might respond dramatically. Such a geometry echoed the solar sail hypothesis, keeping alive the tantalizing idea of deliberate design. Others clung to outgassing, though the data resisted. Jets of sublimating ice could, in principle, explain small accelerations. But where were the visible jets? Where were the sudden jerks? Instead, Atlas glided with a grace uncharacteristic of fragmentation. Its course seemed less the stumble of ice and dust than the measured stride of something tuned. Instruments grew more precise, but the riddle deepened. Einstein's equations held firm, gravity behaving as expected. The error was not in relativity but in what was missing: an invisible push, an extra hand. To skeptics, this was simply poor modeling of cometary physics. To dreamers, it was a whisper from elsewhere. And so relativity, the great unifier of cosmic mechanics, stood unchallenged, but with a companion shadow. The shadow said, "There is more to know. That sunlight and dust and faint gases may not be the whole story. That perhaps there are properties of matter, surfaces, or even intention hidden in the void." The anomaly itself became a philosophical weight. It was not enough to dismiss it as error. The consistency of the deviation forced acknowledgement. And in that consistency, Atlas reminded humanity that certainty is provisional. Even the most trusted laws are only as complete as the universe allows them to be. Observers knew they would not solve the puzzle in time. Atlas would slip away, data streams would dwindle, and the anomaly would remain unresolved. But perhaps that was its role, to remind us that knowledge is never final, that relativity itself, though towering, is not the last word. Atlas glided outward, its acceleration quiet, steady, unyielding, a question written across space-time, left for future generations to answer. As Atlas slipped further from the sun, its enigma pressed less upon numbers and more upon minds. The astronomers, their instruments straining against distance, had little more to add. Yet the philosophers, the poets, the seekers of meaning found themselves newly awakened. For what did it mean to encounter a riddle that resisted all resolution? Some framed Atlas as a parable of humility. Humanity, so confident in its models and machines, had stared into the dark and found itself bewildered. In that, bewilderment was a lesson. That the cosmos is not a solved equation but a living mystery, one that refuses to be exhausted by human intellect. To stand beneath the stars and admit ignorance, they argued, is not weakness but reverence. Others saw in Atlas a test of patience. We demand answers within years, within decades, yet Atlas had wandered for millions, perhaps billions of years before brushing our sky. To expect such a traveler to yield its secrets on our timetable was arrogance. The cosmos operates in epochs, not in press cycles. The lesson of Atlas, then, was not only that we do not know, but that we may not be meant to know yet. Theologians joined the conversation, weaving the mystery into older traditions. Some spoke of Atlas as a cosmic parable, a modern burning bush, silent, inexplicable, but radiant with meaning for those who gazed upon it. Others warned against idolatry, against seeing intention where only physics resides. Yet even in denial, they confessed fascination. The silence of Atlas echoed with the same weight as silence in prayer, absence charged with presence. Psychologists noted how people projected themselves onto the object. Skeptics saw randomness, for they trusted in order. Dreamers saw design, for they longed for contact. Fearful voices imagined threat. Hopeful voices imagined kinship. In this way, Atlas was less a comet or artifact than a cosmic mirror, reflecting the landscape of the human psyche. And in quieter reflections, some found peace. Perhaps the value of Atlas was not in solving it, but in being reminded of mystery itself. The modern world, saturated with explanation, leaves little room for awe. Atlas, indifferent and inscrutable, restored it. To look upon something that resisted the net of comprehension was to feel again the ancient wonder that once filled caves with paintings and temples with stars. Thus, Atlas became not only a visitor from elsewhere in space, but a teacher of philosophy. It asked no questions, gave no answers, and yet demanded reflection. It reminded us that the greatest mysteries are not always meant to be solved, but to be carried like the Titan whose name it bore, bearing the heavens not as a problem to fix, but as a weight to endure. At last, the inevitable began. Atlas, once a faint smear of light at the edge of human instruments, now dimmed again. Its brief season of brightness passed, and with it the fever of daily headlines. Slowly, inexorably, it receded into the darkness from which it had come, dwindling below the thresholds of even the most powerful telescopes. The watchers of the sky recorded their final glimpses, their last strings of data, and then the object was gone, still there, still real, but invisible, swallowed by distance. The end of watch carried with it a strange grief. To follow Atlas night after night was to live in its rhythm, to sense its presence like a distant companion. Now the arc was over. It had entered the solar system in silence, provoked debate and wonder, and left just as silently, gliding back into the interstellar gulf. For astronomers, this was a familiar cycle. Comets come and go, novelties fade. Yet Atlas was more than a comet, and its departure felt like the closing of a chapter that had only just begun. The data archive was immense: spectra, light curves, positional measurements, terabytes of radio scans, but none of it had yielded certainty. Instead of an answer, humanity was left with questions sharpened into absence. Was Atlas natural? Was it engineered? Was it fragment or artifact, messenger or debris? The silence at the end was louder than any conclusion. Still, there was dignity in the ending. Observatories held final vigils, tracking its fading signal until the numbers dissolved into noise. Amateurs spoke of the last nights they glimpsed it in backyard scopes, a faint blur against the endless black. Scientists prepared their last reports, their graphs and uncertainties, their carefully worded phrases that hinted at wonder without surrendering to it. In the quiet after, humanity was reminded of the nature of contact with the cosmos. Such encounters are not dialogues but brushstrokes, brief and fleeting. Atlas did not stay to be studied, it passed. Its lesson lay not in yielding itself fully, but in reminding us that the universe is alive with such wanderers, that discovery is not a rare accident but an ongoing possibility. And so, the end of watch was not only loss, it was promise. If Oumuamua had been the first and Borisov the second, if Atlas was the third, then more would follow. The cosmos, generous in its mysteries, would send others. Each would carry its own riddles, its own mirrors for humanity to confront. For now, though, the sky was emptier. Atlas had slipped back into the void, carrying with it all the secrets it refused to share. And humanity, left staring after it, felt the peculiar ache of wonder unresolved. In the wake of Atlas's fading, what remained was not clarity but consequence. The debates it ignited lingered like aftershocks, shaping both science and imagination. Conferences revisited its anomalies again and again, entire panels devoted to what had not been explained. Papers circulated, careful in language yet restless in tone, repeating the refrain, "Atlas did not fit." It had deepened the mystery of interstellar visitors rather than easing it. For astronomers, this was both frustration and gift. Frustration because precision had failed to cage the anomaly. Gift because such anomalies are fertile soil for discovery. Atlas had revealed how little of the cosmos we had sampled, how provincial our assumptions were. The solar system, once imagined as the standard, now seemed parochial. Out there, beyond the heliosphere, other chemistries, other architectures of matter surely thrived. The cultural aftermath was just as profound. Atlas lived on in documentaries, novels, and artworks. To artists, it became symbol of the stranger who passes without explanation, of the question asked but never answered. To musicians, its silence inspired compositions of absence and restraint. To poets, it was a metaphor for longing something glimpsed briefly, never held. Public fascination waned as headlines turned to other stories, but for many the memory of Atlas lingered, tied to the quiet awe of looking up and knowing something alien had passed overhead. Amateur astronomers kept its ephemeris in their notes, a ghostly trajectory stretching outward, a reminder of the night they shared sky with another star's emissary. Among futurists and engineers, Atlas hardened resolve. Plans for ready-to-launch interceptors gained urgency, no longer speculative, but framed as necessity. To miss one visitor might be excused, to miss the next would be negligence. Space agencies spoke more openly of interstellar object readiness, a new era of preparedness seeded by Atlas's passing. Yet perhaps the deepest consequence was philosophical. Atlas taught that the unknown is not an embarrassment but a horizon. In its contradictions, it showed that mystery can be more enduring than discovery, that silence can weigh more heavily than words. It reminded humanity that the universe is not obliged to be comprehensible on demand, that some truths arrive only as riddles. Atlas left scars of debate and seeds of imagination, twin legacies braided together. It had come unasked, it had gone unanswered, and in between it had widened the space of possibility. To some, it was comet, to others, probe, to others still something stranger, a reminder that reality itself may harbor layers yet unseen. The aftermath of wonder was not resolution but readiness. Humanity had learned to expect the unexpected, to meet the cosmos not only with instruments but with humility. Atlas was gone, but it had changed us. What if Atlas was alien? The question, whispered at first, had grown into the closing refrain of its passage. It was never proven, never disproven. It hovered in the silence left behind, like an echo refusing to fade. To imagine Atlas as a comet was to see the universe as geology, vast and impersonal. To imagine it as a machine was to see the universe as inhabited, intentional, alive with others. Both visions carried weight. Both reshaped the human view of existence. If Atlas was alien, then humanity had already brushed against another mind. Not through dialogue, not through clear exchange, but through presence. A vessel disguised as comet, gliding silently past our cradle, was that not contact, however veiled? It would mean that the stars are not barren, that civilizations reach across gulfs with tools of their own design. It would mean that we are not the only storytellers in the cosmos. If Atlas was alien, it raised questions more unsettling still. Why no signal? Why no greeting? Was its silence a test, waiting to see how we responded? Was it reconnaissance, noting our telescopes, our debates, our readiness? Or was it relic, an artifact from a civilization long gone, its purpose erased, drifting like a bottle in an ocean whose shores had crumbled? In any case, its silence was not emptiness, but intention, whether deliberate or accidental. And if Atlas was not alien, if it was only rock and ice, its mystery remained no less profound. For then it was nature itself that defied us, matter shaped in ways that mocked our categories, chemistry that carried whispers of alien suns. Even as fragment, Atlas bore the weight of the unknown, telling us that the universe is wider than our definitions, stranger than our textbooks. In the end, the question may never be answered. Atlas faded into darkness, leaving humanity with riddles instead of revelations. Yet perhaps this was its gift, to remind us that mystery is not weakness but strength, not absence but abundance. To live with unanswered questions is to live awake to possibility. And so the thought lingers. What if Atlas was alien? The truth may be beyond reach, but the imagination it stirred will not fade. In silence, it gave us a paradox, the comfort of knowing we are small, and the awe of knowing the universe is vast enough to hold secrets still. The night sky returns to quiet, but the echo of Atlas remains. Somewhere beyond the heliosphere, it drifts now, faint, unseen, a shard of mystery vanishing into interstellar dark. It leaves behind no message, no proof, only questions, yet questions are sometimes more enduring than answers. Close your eyes and picture it, a pale fragment gliding silently among the stars. Around it stretches the endless ocean of night, starlight scattered like grains of salt across a boundless table. The object is small, no more than a speck against infinity, and yet it carries with it entire worlds of meaning, for whether it is rock or relic, it has touched our imagination. It has reminded us that the universe is alive with wonders we have not yet named. Breathe slowly, as though you are floating alongside it, unhurried, suspended in calm. Time here is different, stretched across light years, softened into silence. The questions that press so urgently in daylight now dissolve into stillness. Was it comet? Was it craft? It does not matter. What matters is that it was here, and that for a brief season we looked upward and remembered awe. Let the image fade now, gently. See Atlas receding into darkness, its glow dimming until it is only memory. Let the weight of speculation ease from your shoulders. Mystery remains, but it is no longer sharp. It is a soft veil, a reminder that not everything must be solved to be cherished. The stars remain above, eternal and patient. We, fragile and fleeting, have been reminded of our place beneath them, and in that reminder lies peace. Sleep now, with the quiet assurance that the universe still holds secrets, and that wonder itself is a form of belonging. Sweet dreams,